What's going on, everybody? We are back. Episode number 181 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight we're talking about UFC Vegas 93. Alex Perez taking on Tatsuro Taira. Alex Perez's second main event in about as many months here, coming off a knockout of Matthias Nicolau. Tatsuro Taira, his first career main event, and a decently large step up in competition. We'll get to that fight later. First, guys, please, if you like the show, drop a like, subscribe. It'll help us out a lot. We need all the help we can get, especially after last week's card, which we'll discuss in a second. Real quick, though, we're brought to you guys by Fight Numbers. Use the promo code CLUB for 30% off on a monthly package for their picks and their live screen. Again, Fight Numbers, great organization over there. They got Pepe, Chad, Ozzy, and Evan making bets. They got the live odds screen. It's basically best fight odds, except you get live screen across both domestics and foreign books that update every 10 seconds. Great thing that John Kelly's got going on over there. Fight Numbers, promo code CLUB. Check it out. 30% off. It's worth it for the picks alone. To be honest, it's worth it for the live screen alone. It's probably saving you guys a ton of money or making you a ton of money if you use it appropriately. But yeah, without further ado, we can hop into our results from last week. Absolute fucking shitfest for me, if we're being honest. I lost 7.2 units total. I felt like could have had a couple bounces here and there go different, but not too many, honestly. I had a unit on Cody Stamann plus 241. I don't know. Line was probably right. Lapless, comfortable win. Not dominant, but, comfortable enough. I had 2 units on Denise Gomes at plus 145. That was pretty good. Mora turn was more or less everything I expected she would, so that felt good. And that felt like the day was going in the right direction. It was all downhill from there, though. I had 4 units on John Castaneda, plus 115. Credit to Daniel Marcos. He massively outperformed my priors on him, my expectations. One of the reasons I bet Castaneda is I felt like Marcos, without a calf kick, wouldn't be able to rely on his lead hand. I hadn't seen him use it much. And he used it to perfection. Great game plan, came out pressured. Defended all the grappling really well, much better than I expected. Yeah, Marco seems like he's a problem. Bad bet. Then I had 3 units on Thiago Moises, plus 114. He did his normal cuck job, but, credit was due to Klein. Klein defended the takedowns very, very well, much better than I expected. Moises never really got to top position, and he just couldn't really compete on the feet. And then I had 2 units on Ricky Tercios, plus 205. Actually, I think I made a pretty good bet there. Obviously, he won the first round. I mentioned it last week that, the only real way Rosas could win was by a sub, and sure enough, it played out that way. Tercios won the first round and then got his back taken and subbed in round 2. But, I felt like the read was okay. I knew that was a possibility, and he did massively outwork him in terms of total strikes. So, yeah, minus 7.2 units. Hopefully you can get it back this week, although it's not a card I'm very in love with. What do you think, Alex? How did you do?
Reverse sweep for me, so 0 for 3 on my 3 bets. I had John Castaneda as well. Couldn't get the grappling going, as you touched on. I had the under 2.5 in Mora Gomez, which, again, minus 105. Didn't think it was a horrible bet. And then Cody Stamann at plus 220. The only thing I'll really touch about on any of my bets is really that one, and I feel like looking at a pre-fight, it's easy to be like, all right, plus 220 Cody. It's it's worth a shot, but it's like if he's not going to wrestle aggro, that line should be way wider,
He didn't really have much success with it, even when he did, to be honest.
No.
Yeah. I don't know about way wider. I feel like there's only
because my thing is I feel like he probably wasn't going to likely hold him down to begin with.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But he only had 2-3 minutes, I think, to 1 round. So
yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, though, I think with Laplace's style, given it's not very volume intensive or danger intensive, it's kind of, Cody's a good enough striker that it's kind of hard to be minus 250 against him if your finishing upside is low, But, whatever. I don't think I made a good bet. I don't think you made a good bet. So it just is what it is. Anyway, with that out of the way, hopefully we move on to a more fun card. I have a lot of opinions on this card, but nothing. It's funny. I have a lot of opinions, not a ton of bets, and I won't have a heavy amount of risk on the card. But, yeah, what do you think of it? Are you excited for the main event? Thoughts of the card in the aggregate?
I'm honestly the same way with you. I have a lot of opinions on a lot of these fights, but not a ton of bets at the moment.
All right, so let's jump in.
Yep.
First fight of the night. Speaking of fights I don't have opinions on, we got Shaylin Nerdenbeek. He's taking on Melk Costa. Current price, Costa minus 190. Come back on Shaylin. That's what I'm calling him. Plus 165. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I actually do have an opinion here, and I actually was leaning towards Shy coming into the tape here, just because I kind of thought could get his grappling going. But after going through tape, I don't think he can have success doing that over 15 minutes. His gas tank's not that great. His striking defense is not that great either. I think Mel could land takedowns as well. Shy doesn't have the greatest takedown defense as well. So, honestly, I think the over at Pick'em might not be bad, over 2.5. But I'm probably just passing overall.
Yeah, I think the line's fine. I mean, I'm pretty sure Shy can get takedowns here. I'd be a bit surprised if he's able to get any kind of meaningful control, though, at least with Melk flat on his back. Moises kind of struggled to control him early in their fight until round 2. I'd be surprised if Shay can. And I don't really think Shay has the cardio he needs to push grappling aggressively for 15. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of striking and a lot of clinching, which I think is a game that favors Melk a fair amount. I don't think he's a great striker. I think he's a decent bit better than Shay, but he is open. He can get cracked, and Shay does swing with a decent amount of intent. So him buzzing Melk and maybe landing a couple takedowns and making this look closer than the price wouldn't shock me, but which is why I have no real interest in a bet at minus 190. But, yeah, I mean, kind of to Vera Wera's point, Shaylin did have more success striking with Garcia than Costa did. He did. I do think part of that was Shaylin being so open to biting down and, swinging with him, though. But, yeah, I don't feel strongly about the fight. I think the price is fine. I mean, the metrics favor Costa tremendously, so just not something I'm really trying to bet here. I do have a bet on the next fight, though. We got Josephine Nutson taking on Julia Pasterny. I bet a unit on Julia right before we came on the show at plus 169. I think Nutson is a decent prospect because, for women's 115, she obviously has she hits pretty hard. She's obviously very, very physically strong. What's going on, Joe? Just asked something in the chat. But with that said, I still think she's a prospect who's very, very much in development. The 3 fights we've seen her have, she had that fight on Road to UFC against the Can. Then she had her Contender Series fight with Isis Verbeek. And Verbeek just seemed kind of pretty intimidated by her power in that fight. And then obviously last fight with Marnik Mann, which is just an irrelevant fight for all intents and purposes. So you have a woman with 7 fights, good power, good physicality. I don't think she's the best wrestler in the world, but she's strong and she's pretty good in the clinch. Taking on Pasterny, who I'm a fan of Pasterny's game, to be honest. She's a pretty good tie striker, very, very high volume, hits the body, kicks legs, throws with real intent, which you don't really see from a lot of women. And honestly, for a debutante, she's fought a pretty high level of competition. She's got 15 pro fights. She fought Jasmine Jasdavicius up a weight class in her first Contenders fight, which honestly was a very competitive fight. She was just massively outsized in that fight. She fought a bunch of decent women regionally. And I look at this fight and I feel it's possible Nutson's physicality is just too much for her. But like I said, the only time we've really seen Pasterny get out physical was up a weight class against Jasmine, who's just a tank for 125. And I kind of feel like Nutson could hold her on the fence and grapple her there, but I'd be a bit surprised by her getting a ton of top time off takedowns here, even if she's able to get takedowns. And if that's the case, I just kind of feel like it's a close fight. My biggest concern is I think Pasterny is a bit more available to be hit than Nutson is. I think Nutson's going to find a home for her shots a lot. And if it was men's, 135, 145, I probably wouldn't have much interest because I'd be really worried about her getting knocked out. But it's not. It's women's 115, and Pasterny is tough. We saw her fight a pretty slick striker in her Contender Series fight and, kind of eat the shots pretty well. Yeah, I just think it plays close. Maybe lean to the Nutson side because she can cage press her, potentially more likely the two to get takedowns. But I like Pasterny's volume a lot. I like her experience a bit more. I think she does a better job of picking her shots. I have a small play on her here. What are your thoughts, Legs?
I think the line's probably fine where it's at, personally. I think on the feet, like, I think she's the cleaner, crisper striker of the two. To me, Pilastre just seems like a girl who's pretty game, will come forward, like you said, throw a ton of volume, but she's super available to be hit. I don't think she's got the best cardio, not that she's a gasser by any means. And like you mentioned with the cage control and the cage pressing, I do think Nutson could have success doing that in this fight and also probably landing 2 to 3 takedowns.
Yeah, it's possible. We'll see. Moving on, dog shit fight here, though, Lags. I'm going to keep it with you because of that. We got Jekka Saragi minus 335, a comeback on Weston Wilson, plus 275. What are your thoughts?
It's going to be hilarious for as long as it lasts. I mean, maybe Jekka falls and Weston grabs his back, and if he does end up in an advantageous position, he probably will finish him, but I think Jekka finishes him on the feet.
Yeah, I'm not going to give a big breakdown about this. I know there's a lot. I actually know a fair amount of people who are passionate about the Weston Wilson side. And I guess I understand why. I don't think Jack is much of a prospect at all. Bad wrestler. Very, very sloppy striker. He's hittable. And, you know, maybe it's too public to say this, but like Weston Wilson is just so easy to get. Barrett says this is a fun fight. Don't hate. I just think it's. I can see the angle for how Wilson wins this fight. Right? He's tall. He's very long. He's rangy. The problem is, I say he's rangy because I feel like that's like calling a southpaw crafty. In baseball, like that's what we call tall and long guys. But he's not that rangy. He doesn't measure distance very well. It's very easy to get inside on him.
He's just gangly.
I think and I think where Wilson has his best opportunity here is probably in the grappling. And, I mean, don't get me wrong. If he can hit takedowns here, he's probably got a really good chance to win this fight. I'm just kind of skeptical that just because Jubli did, he can. I mean, don't get me wrong. Jubli's pretty bad, but Jubli does come from a wrestling background. I think is a good bit physically stronger than Wilson is. So, yeah, I mean, if Wilson gets on top of him, he can win. But I kind of think it's not going to be too hard for Jekka to crash space. I mean, maybe Wilson can win on the feet. I just think he's so fragile that at some point Jekka's going to put hands on him and hurt him. I just don't have any interest in getting involved in this fight.
Yeah.
Moving on. This is a fight that's gotten a surprising amount of attention this week. Carly Judis taking on Gabriela Fernandez. Current price, Fernandez minus 155. The comeback on Judis plus 135. I've given some thought to betting Fernandez here, where the price is now. The thing is, so like I think she's the much better fighter. You know, I kind of think people talking up Judis like she's this little Terminator. I heard the same shit before she went on her contenders fight, and Ernesto Karaskady, you know, beat her up there. Split decision, but Karaskady did a ton of damage to her. And I mean, look, she's got good cardio. She pushes a pace, no doubt about that. But the woman is just very, 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 very free to hit. I think she's an interesting prospect because she is durable and does push a pace with good cardio. You know, those are the kind of things, you know, you want to back in women's MMA. I just kind of think where she's at now, she's still very, very green. And she's taken on a fighter in Gabriela Fernandez who is, at least on the feet, isn't really green at all. You know, Fernandez is thick, very, very fast, very explosive, very technically sound tie striker, you know, really good leg kicks, which I think could be huge here given the southpaw nature. And every time we've seen Fernandez fight a southpaw, she rips him aggressively. I think Judis is the better boxer, but Fernandez carries a lot more pop in her hands. I just kind of pictured in my head as this being a drubbing on the feet, you know, especially because I think there's some thought that Judis could break her and gas her. But we saw Gabriela Fernandez get put through the meat grinder in her last two fights in the grappling and still be throwing heat deep in round 3. Like, I don't think she has a cardio problem. And she's way more experienced. I mean, Judis has 4 fights. She comes from a softball background. Fernandez has 11. She's training at MMA Masters now. But I am not betting her, at least as of yet. If it keeps coming in, I might. The thing is, I don't think it would be easy for Judis to get takedowns here. But if Fernandez does wind up on her back, I mean, she is hopeless, like completely hopeless on her back. And while I think she can defend the takedowns probably fine, she throws a lot of kicks, a lot of high kicks, a lot of body kicks, a lot of calf kicks. She's going to put a lot of opportunities to hit a banana peel and end up on her back, especially as the fight continues to go on and things are getting sweatier in there. The canvas is getting sweatier. And I just, it's very, very hard for me to lay WMMA juice, number one, on someone who's on a kicker who, if she ends up on her back, loses a round. Number two, we've seen how the judging's gone this week. Funny story about the Gomes fight last week. I was at my son's birthday party, but we were doing it at my in-laws' house. And I was outside watching like my 5 nieces and nephews and one of my kids in the pool outside. And I had the fight on and it ended. I didn't even wait to see the decision. I was like, all right, that was awesome. I'm going to get back to having my full attention on what's going on in the pool. Kiddie pool. Nope. I promise everybody before anybody gets bent out of shape. Right. I should have probably started with that. Yeah. But then I get a text message that's like split. And I'm like, that can't be the Gomes fight. Like, what did I like? It's every week we get something like that. And so to lay minus 155, I got to be pretty sure she's going to keep it upright for 15 minutes and beat her up. And I think she will, but I don't know. If it got to minus 125, I'd probably enter on Fernandez. But I don't really understand betting Judis, to be honest. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the sentiments that you have as well. I mean, we were chatting about this last night a bit. I mean, I think more of the worry is her just being on her back, just ending up on her back in some way, shape, or form. Like, I don't think the volume angle is more of the worry here for me because I feel like the power shots coming back from Fernandez is probably going to deter a lot of that volume. So, yeah, I'm with you as well. To me, honestly, like minus 140 or better, and I'm in.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Especially, and Judis has never been in there with a calf. I mean, as a southpaw, she doesn't fight many southpaws. She's never been in there with someone who's going to throw calf kicks the way Fernandez does, which seems like it could be. I mean, you go back and watch the Bleda fight. It was like 4 kicks, and Bleda's leg was like horribly compromised. Dixon says he doesn't think Judis is going to try to wrestle, but she did attempt 4 or 5 takedowns against Carrasqueta on Contender Series. She just, Carrasqueta is a giraffe and not easy to take down from the upper body. And I don't think
Fernandez is either.
Yeah, I don't
think. Pretty thick and built herself.
The problem with Fernandez, if you look, she's got decent hips on initial entry. She does a good job grabbing the whizzer. She does an okay job of taking underhooks. The problem is if you make her have to think about a second attack, that's when it falls to shit. She was doing a good job stuffing Jasmine's takedowns. And then as soon as Jasmine would kind of weight shift, she'd just kind of collapse to the ground. And I don't really think Judis has that wrestling ability, but still, I mean, it's worth keeping in mind, So.
Yep. Completely agree.
Moving on. Garrett Armfield, Brady Heisten. I know a lot of passionate takes on this fight as well. Do you have a passionate one, Lags? Current price is Armfield minus 180, Heisten plus 155. What do you think?
So super intriguing fight. 4 starters, I should say. Both of these guys, I am coming off of L's betting on their fights. So Brady Heisten, I bet Dana at minus 145. Yep. Horrible, I know. And then I bet Katona against Armfield, round 3 decision at like minus 150. Honestly, just bad reads on the guys in general. To me, I just don't think Brady's much outside of his wrestling. And I don't think, he's a decent wrestler, but like his striking is not great at all. A lot of just kicks from volume, just trying to set up wrestling in general, but he doesn't mix it in well. And that's why I think Garrett can likely keep the fight standing, at least early in the fight. But that's kind of the thing, like Armfield's cardio kind of wanes later in the fight. So I feel like later in the fight, Brady could potentially find a sub, but I think Garrett definitely could find a knockout on the feet early because Brady's very open to be hit. And like I said, I think while fresh, it's going to be tough for Brady to get his takedowns going.
Yeah. I wanted to find a bet on this fight on one side or the other. I don't know why, but for some reason, when I went to tape it felt like a fight you'd bet on.
Yeah. For me, it was.
When I say you, I mean me.
Me too. And I was actually coming into it leaning Armfield, and now I'm coming out of it either thinking like fight doesn't go or passing.
Dixon saying everyone's afraid to fade Armfield because they're afraid he won't be their friend anymore. I actually think it's pretty obviously Brady or pass, and I know a lot of people on the other side of that. I just like you touched on it, Lags. I mean, I watch Brady, and it's like if he can't dominate in the grappling, this guy is a fucking liability on the feet. He's there to get cracked, and I actually think his durability is probably a bit overstated. Tercio's hurt him really, really bad. Obviously, Dana hurt him really, really bad. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he got knocked out by Shannon Hellier on
And
the
Fernie
reviews.
hurt him too.
Yeah. I mean, this guy is going to get knocked out again, likely multiple times in the UFC. And that's kind of my concern because when you watch the two of them, man, Armfield he's a pretty slick boxer, honestly. Good jab, good at setting up counters, very, very aggressive, throws with intent, all things you want to see. And I think he's going to put hands on Brady here in this fight, throughout this fight, in all likelihood. However, you touched on the important thing with cardio, and I really think Armfield's cardio is kind of appalling. I know he won a decision last fight with Katona, but if you rewatch that fight, he was basically taking the last minute and a half of every round off, and he looked like dire and tired late in that fight. I'll give him credit because he bit down and threw back when he needed to pull the rounds out, but I just think someone that keeps a pace on him for 15, he's going to always slow down. And the other thing I really don't like about him is, one, I don't think he's that good a wrestler. Katona went 4 for 9 on takedowns. Katona's a terrible wrestler. He's okay. He's a good grappler, but he's not very good at getting takedowns. I don't think Brady's a great wrestler either because he can't set up he doesn't have the hands to really set up clean entries. But once he gets in on your hips, he is a pretty good wrestler and he's very, very strong. And Armfield, man, every time this guy gets up, he gives his back up. He is going I think Brady, if he gets multiple takedowns, could potentially get multiple back takes and a sub here, which I think is potentially concerning for, to back a guy at juice with bad cardio who is going to give up his back. But with that said, the reason I just don't have interest in it is I think it's going to be hell for Brady early in this fight. I think if you really want him, there's probably going to be a good live entry available. And I mean, ultimately, Brady, I actually rate Armfield. He seems pretty good to me. And he's not a guy, there will come a time to fade Garrett Armfield, but I don't really want to be doing it with Brady Heisten, unless it gets out to plus 180, plus 185. But I do lean Heisten at the number. I just don't have any interest in betting it. Moving on, disaster of a fight here. We got Nate Maness taking on Jimmy Flick. Hard to find a betting angle unless you're our boy Clint, who has anchored him to his entire betting slate this week. Bold. Well, not that bold, actually. I'm not going to say it's that bold. Maness, current price, minus 500. Come back on Flick, plus 375. I don't have much to say here. The narrative's basically going to be Flick needs takedowns in an early sub. It's true. I think he's going to struggle badly to get takedowns. I think even if he does, unless he jumps on a guillotine, it's going to be hard for him to get meaningful. And he could jump on a guillotine, but it's going to be hard for him to get meaningless or meaningful control against Maness. Flick is one of the only flyweights in the division with really bad cardio. He's fragile, no defense, tiny, taking on a giant who can hit and will probably keep this upright. Maness should womp, but I mean, minus 500. Fuck that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's really no upside with Jimmy outside of the early sub. And to me, I don't know. I don't put much stock into it at all. This should be easy work for Nate. I don't really know why Jimmy's getting another fight. I mean, he did beat Malcolm Gordon, which cashed in a great ticket for us.
Yeah. I mean, that was great, but that was Malcolm Gordon was
he was owning him.
And yes, Malcolm Gordon was absolutely whooping his ass, but he was the perfect guy. Malcolm Gordon courts disaster in every fight. He was the perfect guy to fade with Jimmy Flick. No one else am I looking to bet, Jimmy Flick against. In fact, I'm always looking to fade Jimmy Flick. But anyway, we move on to a much more fun fight. And I have a bet. I bet to Ulanbekov last week to win 2 units. I capped it minus 230 here. I got an earlier price on him. If the line comes back in, I think anything minus 200 or better is probably pretty good here. I am a fan of Josh Van as a prospect. Super young, 23 years old, great cardio, very good pressure, good boxing, hits the body hard. I think he's got a very, very bright future in the UFC. But with that said, he's as impressive as his wins have been in the UFC so far. To this point, his best win is a split decision with Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Borjas and Maness, I'm not sure either of them is UFC caliber. Obviously, he's very, very young, and there's a decent amount of regional tape on him showing these fairly large weaknesses in the grappling, if we're being honest. And now he is taking on Tatsuro Ulanbekov, who I personally think is one of the best fighters in the division. He's big, kind of rangy. The biggest criticism I would have of Ulanbekov is he can get cracked in the pocket. Just doesn't move his head very well. You saw Durden land hard on him a bunch. Tim Elliott landed a bunch. Bruno Silva landed a bunch. But I think he's pretty durable from what we've seen. Obviously, Bruno Silva hits very, very hard. He stood in there and dealt with the shots back. So does Durden. Elliott can crack a bit too. Elliott did hurt him in that fight. And, I mean, maybe Van can hurt him here. But where I really think there is a giant gap is in the grappling. Like, Ulanbekov's a really, really good wrestler. And if he gets Van down, like so far from what we've seen, Van kind of defaults to giving his back up or trying to counter grapple. And I think both of those things are going to go really, really poorly. I mentioned it this week in our group chat, but I'd make Cody Durden a moderate favorite against Van at this stage of their careers anyway. Obviously that could change in a year or two. Van's super young. But like I bet Tagir at minus 170 against Cody Durden, which gives you an idea of like kind of how I view this fight. I think he's going to get takedowns. I think he can get the back. He's got a great body triangle. He's a very good grappler. And even the takes that like Van live could be good. I mean, maybe it could be. I just don't. We haven't really seen Tagir show bad cardio, and I kind of think the grappling is going to be there for Tagir all fight long. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's a lock. I made him 70%. But I think it's a tremendously gigantic step up in competition for Van here. Tagir's probably literally in the minus 800 to minus 1,000 range against Bunes and Borjas. And now he's like minus 220 against Van. To me, it doesn't make a ton of sense. What do you think?
So talking about the live angle first, I would say the only thing regarding that to me, like I would not bet Josh Van pre. I would only bet him after like maybe a round because he's usually a slow starter in general. So you're almost indefinitely going to get a much better price. But I'm totally with you. I think Tagir, the grappling upside to me makes him like a massive minus 230, minus 240-ish type favorite. Yeah. I think there's a massive grappling hole like you touched on already. I don't think there's much more needs to be said on that.
I just want to clarify something again to Brick Swat's comment.
I know, I did.
The pool was 2 feet tall, was 2 feet of depth, and all of these kids are over 5 years old and take swimming lessons, okay? There was zero risk, I promise.
Yep.
It was literally an inflatable kiddie pool. God, that is going to be
that first. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Can never run for president, and that's going to get replayed over and over again. Again in commercials. Anyway, we move on. Adam Fugitt taking on Josh Quinlan. I'll throw it to you here, Lags. Current price, Quinlan minus 125. Come back on Fugitt plus 105. What are your thoughts?
Haven't made a bet here, and I probably won't unless it blows out a little bit more, but I like the Fugitt side personally. I think he's got more ways to win here. I think on the feet, if he's not getting knocked out, he's winning minutes in the striking. I think he's a much better grappler here. I think he can land takedowns. I think he's got the better cardio of the two. To me, like, Quinlan's wins are very, shit. Like, his career in general, to me, outside of wit knockout, is nothing. Whereas, like, Fugitt at least has some credible wins here and there, has fought decent competition. So, I think Fugitt, slight favorite to me, makes more sense.
Yeah. I think the line, honestly, if anything, I think I would lean to the Quinlan side at the current price. And I say this as someone who is remarkably anti Quinlan, in general.
Right.
It's funny. I went into tape, like pretty sure I was going to bet Fugitt because he checked a lot of boxes. He's a bit more experienced. He obviously has some wrestling in his toolkit, bit taller, a lot longer. I think he's got 5 inches of reach. But man, like when you watch Quinlan, like the guy is just so slow. Like he's got no athleticism, He's very Fugitt. Yeah, sorry. He's so slow. I think he's easy to hit if you get inside on him. I don't think he manages distance particularly well, and I don't think he is particularly durable either. So I understand wanting to fade Quinlan because he's bad. And like, I don't think Fugitt's a terrible fighter. You know, he's a decent wrestler. He throws good body kicks, but I just don't think he has the athleticism for this level. And like, I look at Quinlan, like I said, I think Quinlan's bad. Dude swings, big hooks, doesn't have really any process to his striking or grappling. But what I will say is, for one, I think, you know, the market sees Quinlan lose 2 fights in a row to Trey Waters and Danny Barlow. And there is quite literally nothing about those games that Adam Fugitt can mimic in terms of, you know, speed, ranginess, defense. He just had such huge issues closing distance on both of them and was so badly outspeeded. He just really didn't have much of a chance. And I backed him against Barlow, but I don't think that I don't think those fights are at all applicable to this fight, just because I don't think Fugitt is capable of that. So when I think about it, to me, I mean, could Fugitt outstrike him and just outwork him? Sure. But I feel like he's going to get into heavy exchanges in this fight. You know, a few of them, if they're on the feet. Like, Fugitt's best path to me, I think, is grappling. But I don't think he's going to have an easy time taking Quinlan down or controlling him, which means I personally think they're likely to be at distance a bit more. And while I think Fugitt's the much more technically sound fighter in all phases, I just think the firepower and the horsepower on the Quinlan side is massively more than what Fugitt offers back. I feel like Quinlan's a lot more likely to land the bigger shots and a lot more likely of the two to finish here. I think the bearish case against Quinlan here is that, to Glenbot's point, you know, he took an absolute beatdown by Barlow, and it was a very short time ago. But I just look at the hardware gap, and man, I can't back Fugitt against that, you know. So I lean the Quinlan side, but no bet for me. Moving on, another squash match here, or on paper, a squash match anyway. We got Asu Amabayev. He's taking on Jose Johnson. Current price Amabayev minus 600. Comeback on Johnson plus 425. What do you think, Legs?
I don't have much to say on this personally. I largely think it is a squash match, and I think Asu's going to get the takedowns, and I think he probably does sub Jose Johnson at some point, probably in the later half of the fight.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, Jose Johnson is just terrible defensive wrestling.
Yeah.
If he was able to keep it standing, he is huge and very long and hits hard. I wouldn't be like blown away by Johnson like memeing him like early in this fight, but I kind of think once Asu kind of gets his game going, the takedowns will probably come easy. The only other case I can make for Jose is he is like very, very long and has a decent front choke game. So like if Asu doesn't mind his P's and Q's, I could see him getting choked. But ultimately, I mean, he should dominate minutes here. Maybe sub Johnson. I think he's got better cardio than Johnson does. Yeah, I mean, it's just a good grappler against a terrible grappler. I don't really have any interest in backing Jose. Yeah, I mean, it's Asu. Moving on, Miles Johns, Douglas De Silva de Andrade. Current price, John's taking some money here. Minus 135, Miles Johns. A comeback on De Andrade, plus 115. I don't know. I mean, I kind of wanted to bet Douglas until I started taping him. And, I mean, most of my pre-tape thoughts I still kind of believe, which is that I think Douglas is a better mixed martial artist. Just I think he has a lot more strike diversity. I think he's, well, maybe not anymore, but for most of his career was a better athlete, bit more exclusive, or not exclusive, explosive. I think Miles Johns would have a hard time holding him down in all likelihood. But what bothered me in the tape here is I just think the durability is declining rapidly here. You know, he's been hurt a bunch recently. Like Morozov almost finishing him with strikes, pretty concerning because the dude can't bust a grape. Obviously, Cody Stamann also can't bust a grape and hurt him really, really badly in his last fight. And then you have Miles Johns, who, you know, I bet Miles Johns a fair amount in his career, but, you know, fairly basic fighter, decent calf kick when the rare time he decides to throw it. I mean, this is a guy who only threw 6 calf kicks against Vince Morales, which should tell you a lot about his IQ. Decent wrestler, good jab, decent amount of power, just all around like solid fighter. And I think about this fight, and like I said, I think Douglas is the better fighter, except of the two, you know, Douglas is really, really old. He's 39 or 38. Johns is only like 32. I just feel Johns is a lot faster at this point in their careers. I think he should be able to find a home for the jab fairly often. And, someone else mentioned this to me today, and I agree with it. But, a lot of Douglas's offense is just explosive, like blitz oriented. And that's pretty good for Johns, who likes to kind of move laterally and jab. I just think Johns has a lot more finishing equity at this point. I think he has more process win via grappling, even though I kind of think it's unlikely he'll hold him down. And he's a lot younger. So, yeah, I mean, even though Douglas, I think, is better and has a lot more experience, I just don't really want to get involved here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is an easy pass fight, personally. And first so being what you touched on with Douglas Silva's durability, obviously waning as we've seen. But to me, Miles Johns, I mean, he's just mid to me, like pretty low volume. He's an okay wrestler when he goes to it, but again, when he goes to it, you touched on the calf kicks already. To me, I think it's probably just a close fight in all likelihood. Whereas, like you touched on, I do think Miles probably has the higher finishing upside.
Moving on, Timmy Midnight Kuwamba making his second UFC fight. He is currently, I believe he's a minus 200-ish favorite, taking on Lucas Almeida, who's around the plus 175 range, I think, depending on the book. FightOdds.io doesn't seem to be crawling data for Pinnacle or Bet Online, so I'm not 100% sure. But the price is around that. What are your thoughts here, Lex?
So I don't think highly of Kuwamba in general, but Almeida's career just seems really weird to me. Like getting hurt by Trezano and that fight in general just gives me bad vibes about him in general. I don't think that guy's got great defense. I don't think, obviously, the guy doesn't have great takedown defense in general. Not that really matters here. I don't think Kuwamba is a great wrestler. To me, it's Almeida or pass, but I just have weird vibes on the guy in general.
Yeah, I have a small bet on Almeida at plus 178 for a unit, but I kind of agree with you because going into tape, I was thinking this might be a decent size wager, given what we've seen from Kuwamba, both on Contender Series and in his debut. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I just don't think Almeida is very good. What I do think he is good at is throwing with intent and physicality. Obviously, he's fast, throws hard, carries a decent bit of power, good calf kicks. What I really don't like from him, though, is the guy just doesn't seem to see punches in exchanges at all. I think that's the bigger thing. When you look at the Trezano and the Feely fight, he just didn't see the shots that were hurting him whatsoever. He just seems to be like bull in a china shop, go forward, and wants to throw down. But he just gets caught unassuming a bunch of times and gets hurt. I don't think he's a great grappler. Obviously, I laid a big chalk price against Pat Sabatini, but I mean, with that said, he's basically getting priced at a worse price than he was against Sabatini here against Timothy Kuwamba. And I don't really understand that because Balaji Oki isn't a great grappler, and Kuwamba had trouble really doing much on top of Oki. I do think Kuwamba, he's an interesting prospect in that obviously he comes from a wrestling background. I actually think he's a pretty good athlete who is pretty quick. So I could see Kuwamba maybe landing some big counters and putting Almeida down on the feet. It's pretty easy for me to visualize. But with that said, if he doesn't put Almeida down, I kind of think the fight's super likely to play close. Mateo Vogel pretty easily outstruck Kuwamba on Contender Series. And I think Vogel's a decent regional fighter, but he's not as good a striker or as dangerous a striker as Almeida is. And then you watch Balaji Oki literally won that fight with a jab. I mean, you can talk all day long about it with short notice up a weight class, but Oki literally did nothing but jab him for 15 minutes en route to winning that decision. I just think he's going to see much more strike diversity than he's ever seen here in Almeida. And yeah, I mean, Almeida's a lot more experienced. This is the worst fighter he's fought in the UFC or Contender Series. So I favor Kuwamba because he is younger and I think he's a better athlete and he does come from a wrestling background, but plus 180 is a big price, man. I feel like Kuwamba 55 to 60%, maybe minus 150 makes some sense here. So yeah, I mean, small bet for me on the Almeida side. Moving on, co-main event. We can say as few words as possible about this. Ikram Alscov taking on current Mr. Dern, Antonio Trocoli. Alscov minus 1,500, Trocoli plus 850. What do you think, Alex?
I don't even think this fight hits the ground, and I don't think Ikram should even try to take it to the ground. I think Trokoli's striking is god-awful, super hittable, super just wild in general. I think Ikram can just finish him on the feet.
Yeah,
so that's
I
guess
agree.
I guess that's my question to you. Are you picking KO or sub out of the two methods?
I actually kind of sort of lean to the over just because, I mean, Trokoli is going to try to grapple.
I said the KO or the sub, but over under that works too, John.
Well, because I'm not sure. I don't feel strongly about it.
Oh, okay.
Like that's what I'm saying. I actually kind of think over is an interesting. Like I agree with that. I'm obviously not picking Trokoli. I think he's going to lose and likely get finished. If I had to guess, I would guess KO. But I mean, what's his KO? Minus 300?
No, it's like minus 150.
Plus 170. That's interesting. It's actually not horrible. I mean, well, he's plus one. Oh God, both of those. Oh no, never mind. Minus 150. That's what
I was saying. It was minus 150 for KO. Yeah.
No interest. Yeah, I think over could be interesting just because we know Trokoli is a jiu-jitsu guy who's going to want to try to at least get Alscov down, you would think. If he shows up to fight. He may just be happy to show up and get knocked out and get a second fight. Who knows? But it's not hard to imagine a scenario where Alscov shoots and then kind of pulls guard if he doesn't get in. And if that happens, it's kind of easy to imagine like 5 to 8 minutes of top time for Alscov against the black belt. He might just play guard and try to lock down position. I don't feel strongly about it because he is minus 1,500. I think Alscarov's probably going to finish him, but if anything, I'd be looking at the over here. Moving on, main event. Tatsuro Taira. He's taking on Alex Perez. I haven't bet it yet. I'm just watching the line. I'm eventually going to bet Perez, obviously. I guess the
captain of the fan club.
I still think he's like the best flyweight in the world, other than maybe Pantoja. I guess my reticence to, and let me make it clear, when I say that, it's like the top 5 flyweights I all think are pretty close in skill. So it's not like I think he's like massively better than anybody up there.
Right.
But I guess my reticence here is just, I mean, the UFC obviously is trying to push Taira. They're trying to push China. They would love to have a Chinese prospect. And obviously, Alex Perez has had a tendency for making catastrophic grappling mistakes early in fights. But with that said, I really think Taira is going to struggle to wrestle Alex Perez, to be honest. I am very, very confident that Mohamed Mokaev is a much, much better wrestler than Taira is. You know, most of Taira's takedowns tend to be upper body. Like occasionally he'll shoot a double, but he's not a great wrestler. He's usually just out physicaling guys. And I don't think, Vera said Taira's Japanese. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I'll go fuck myself. Just disregard everything I just said. Oops.
So you have I was going to say, do you have Tapology open there, John?
I do have it open. Wow. It's been a rough week. I mean, Mokaev went 3 of 20 on takedowns against this guy. And where Mokaev had his most success was kind of getting Perez to sprawl and then hitting that duck under that he does, that he is just so fucking good at and so fast. And I don't think Taira has that in his toolkit, you know? Like, Mokaev's very big for the weight class. So is Taira, to be honest. But he's actually developed a decent, like, jank striking volume game that if you're trying to stuff his takedowns, he'll use that and then shoot on you. I just feel Taira's entries aren't going to be enough to... I mean, maybe he gets a takedown or two, but you kind of saw against Mokaev. Perez did a really good job of working up. I actually kind of think the subs we've seen from him in the UFC have been more a function of just kind of a weird stretch of play. Like, he got guillotined by Fig. I don't think he realized he was in danger until it was too late. Not great, but I think just what it is. And Fig's got a crazy squeeze. And then when you look at, I mean, the Pantoja fight, Pantoja came at him like a bat out of hell. They exchanged hard. He stuffed the takedown and then tried to pull his foot out and tripped, and Pantoja sprinted up and grabbed his back. It just seemed very, very mean. And I'm very sure Taira is not going to bring that kind of pace or intensity on the feet. We have not a large sample, but a decent sample of Taira being fairly low volume on the feet. And while I think Taira's striking is improving, I don't think he's going to bring anywhere near the volume that Perez does. We have seen, Taira struggle with leg kicks a fair amount thus far in his UFC career, which obviously Perez throws pretty well. And he's never fought anybody that has the kind of power that Perez does, or pressure, really. Perez is going to pressure him in this fight. And yeah, I don't know. I think Taira is going to have I would have a very hard time imagining Tatsuro Taira out wrestling Perez. Maybe he outstrikes him or just gets a back take. Like that could happen too, obviously in a scramble or something. He's a sick back taker, so it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. But I think Perez should mostly be able to keep this on the feet if he wants to. And my only concern there is just you could tell in the Mokaev fight, especially with having the Nicolau fight in the rear view now, that Perez was so low output because he was worried about the takedown. And that's kind of my fear here. Like he kind of lost the Mokaev fight via volume, not because he couldn't have won it. Like he looked like the better fighter in that fight.
Not like he got out wrestled in that fight. Yeah.
What?
I was going to say, not like he got out wrestled.
No.
And that's why he lost that fight. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point. So I think that's a concern, but I think stylistically it's favorable. I mean, it's hard to understate how big a step up this is for Taira, man. Like I am like very high on Taira as a prospect. I think he's extremely interesting, nasty jiu-jitsu player, very big for the weight class. But like this dude's 5 fights were Carlos Candelario, CJ Vergara, Jesus Aguilar, Edgar Chairez, and Carlos Hernandez. Now he's jumping up to fight a guy who fought for the title in the not too distant past and who looks like he might still be in his prime based on that Nicolau fight. I just...
And a main event, too.
And in a main event, yeah. His first main event for Taira here. I just don't really see how you can really get to like firm favorite Taira. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe he'll go past my expectations here. But yeah, I'm eventually going to bet Perez, but it looks like all Taira money so far. What do you think, Legs?
I bet the over 2.5, minus 150.
Oh, yeah. So since you said that, Glinbot asked why the under 2.5 is plus money.
Well, that's because I like the over 2.5 minus 150. And that's because I largely agree with John in the fact that I don't think it's going to be easy for Taira to have early wrestling success here against Perez. I mean, I think the common nature, most people are thinking, oh, Perez sticks his neck in things. Taira's a good submission grappler. He's probably going to find the sub at some point, but got to have good wrestling to get there, really. And again, like you touched on, could have a back take here or there, but I don't rate Taira's wrestling that great. I don't think his entries are that solid. So I think he's in for a tough main event. I think Perez could eventually win a close decision here, end up going 25. But I think it's largely just a close fight that Perez probably neutralizes a lot of that grappling.
Yeah, Dixon asked if he lands 0 takedowns, does he win? I mean,
I don't think so.
Probably not. But I mean, with that said, though, it's like he could always land something meme or try a takedown that Perez sprawls too hard on, get a back take in a scramble. There are ways for him to win. But obviously, I think it's yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say he throws pretty hard on the feet, too. Not that he's a great striker, but he throws within 10 on the feet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I think it's an uphill battle. Even if Taira were to compete on the numbers striking, Perez throws with a lot more intent than he does, and he throws those calf kicks. It would be an uphill battle without takedowns, but obviously, I mean, there's always ways to win for him to get to those positions. Or, he's a young kid. Matt, he could get a lot better striking. I just am inclined to lean on the fact that this guy's got 15 fights against mostly abysmal competition. Even in the UFC, they've given him basically the bottom rung of flyweight, and now he's jumping right up near the top rung, which is against a guy who's an elite defensive...
And only been fighting the top elite guys over the past couple
of years.
I
mean, the guys who sub Perez in the UFC are Davison Figueiredo and Alessandro Pantoja. I mean, it just feels like this is a classic, undefeated hype job getting a bit too much love. And to be clear, I think he's more than a hype job. I think Taira's got a pretty bright future. But, man, this is a gigantic jump in competition for him.
Now, I will say, though, it's probably the best older fighter that they could give, best name value that they could give him, where it's like promoting him enough where we touched on a little bit. Perez has had a lot of high-profile fights where it's like, okay, now Taira is going to get more recognition to the common folk.
It's probably a win-win for the UFC because they get to pump Taira if he wins. And, like, they love their Contender Series guys. You know, there's a reason they kind of let Perez jump the line to fight for the title. It's because he was from Contender Series. So they're probably kind of happy with either outcome here in my mind. Vera asked, is he going to be champ soon? I mean, I don't know. If he wins this fight, he's certainly closer, right? He's probably 1 or 2 wins away from a title shot, given the state of the division. And that Steve Ursig just fought for a title. But whether he'll be champ or not, I mean, Alex Perez, like many other fighters that, that we talk about on here, loves to court catastrophe. So,
buyer beware.
I mean, it's like buyer beware is a favorite, but at like plus 170, like what I'll put it to you like this, Lex. Like this is kind of how I'm thinking about it because initially, like I was thinking about passing. Like what is the maximum possible line Taira could be in this fight?
I think you would have to assume he gets dominant wrestling control, dominant grappling early, probably finds a sub.
It's hard to imagine him being better than minus 200 as a true price.
Yeah, I was going to say 225. Yeah.
Right. Whereas it's not like, would it really blow you away if Perez just easily shut down his wrestling and beat the shit out of him? Like, would that be a shocking outcome to you?
I think he's a better striker. Yeah. I mean, that's
what I'm saying.
Me, yeah.
So it's like if you take a scale and you're looking at like potential tail risk here, it's like to bet Taira at juice, you're hoping he's minus 200 to minus 225. Like that's basically what you're hoping for. Whereas Perez, it's like your downside is he wins 1 in 3. Your upside is the true price is he's like 65, 70%, and you're getting just absolutely ridiculous value. So, I mean, when you think about it like that, it's like you kind of have to like send it on Perez here, whether you like Taira or not, and I do, Yep. So, anyway, those were our thoughts. By the way, did they officially cancel the McGregor fight?
Don't believe so. No.
Okay, so they're still doing their, the little back and forth
thing for now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hopefully that fight sticks together. Otherwise, that card could be pretty dire for a pay-per-view, or maybe even move to being a fight night.
You know what did stick together, which was massive news, was Joey Chestnut and the hot dog eating contest.
So was that like a false flag, like a psyop to like?
I think so. To push
to because people were like outraged on Twitter. Like I was just like,
John Kelly.
Shit.
I saw John. John Kelly was out.
I did too. I mean, don't get me wrong. We usually go to my in-laws and we watch it, but
I only watch it for Joey. Like I don't give a shit if he wasn't in it.
Of course, but we know he's gonna win too, though. It's not like there's like high drama or anything.
But
like
I'm
that.
here for him eating 70+ hot dogs. Like I want to see that.
Well, we're getting it. Kobayashi's coming back. It could be a big year for the Japanese between Taira and Kobayashi. Vera asked, "How would I line Mokaev Taira?" I would say like Mokaev like minus 200. What do you think?
I was going to go a little lower than that. I was thinking like minus 170 personally.
I just can't see Taira out wrestling him or subbing him really. Actually, I guess he could sub him, but
he could sub him.
Yeah, I mean, he did almost get subbed by Philo.
I was going to say, what's the height discrepancy between those two? Taira and Mokaev.
They're pretty. Taira's 5'7". I think Mokaev's 5'8". They're pretty. They're both pretty big flyweights. We're gonna get to talk about Mokaev next month. I have a fairly strong take on that fight. I'm excited for it. But yeah, I mean, we got the Joey Chestnut news out of the way. Unfortunately, we're not able to break John Kelly in the chat. The man, free Joey. I'm with that. But we got it on Netflix. We got Joey Kobayashi on Netflix. The 2 greatest hot dog eaters of all time. That is the return of Kobayashi. He's on the PEDs. He's coming for 100 hot dogs this year.
Unreal.
But yeah, guys, that's gonna do it again. Please, at some point, I gotta ask John Kelly to get us a new overlay because I can't do design for shit here. But the Club and Sub podcast is brought to you by FightNumbers.com. It's John Kelly's site. You got the live odds screen. You have the best DFS projections in the game from John Kelly, and you got access to 3 great bettors: Pepe, Evan, Ozzy, content from the Giga Chad. It's great stuff. 30% off your first month if you use the promo code CLUB. It will make you money right off the bat. Check out fightnumbers.com. And guys, if you like the show, drop a like, subscribe. It would help us out. We'd appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you faded me last weekend so you're not deep in the red. And I hope you'll follow me this weekend so we can get in the green. Anyway, guys, good luck. God bless. Peace.